Hello, I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, and welcome to this video series which is all about teaching primary maths in the academic year 2021-22 to the classes which are struggling most because of the effects of lockdown. This is the video about teaching children who are 9 to 10 years old, which is year 5 in England or P6 in Scotland or 4th grade in the US, but in this video I'm just going to refer to it as year 5. In this video, I'm going to describe the challenges that some of our most severely affected classes are facing. I'm going to suggest some start of the day targeted fluency activities that you can use to fill the gaps where children have significant gaps. I'm going to talk about how you can teach the Year 5 curriculum effectively, even if a significant number of your children have quite a few gaps in their learning from the last 2 years. And finally, I'll suggest some things you might need this year, so if there's a little bit of budget floating around, you can grab it and spend it wisely. So the biggest challenges lie with the schools that serve the communities where very few children were home educated during lockdown. So these children have had their education hugely disrupted since the middle term of year 3, when a lot of them were still only 7 years old. And typically in these schools, 10 or a dozen children might have been in during lockdown because their parents were key workers. So those children have learnt really well and have flown, and then the rest of the class came back late last year and they were miles behind, and there were so many issues to address that year 4 teachers simply weren't able to get on top of the maths. So now as a year 5 teacher, it's your job to sort it all out, and you really can do this, and it should be a hugely rewarding and enjoyable year as you make great progress with your class. So let's talk about how it's done. The first thing I'm suggesting is that you reorganise your day so that early in the day, preferably first thing, children come in and do 10 minutes work on targeted maths for fluency. And children need to be working through worksheets that will help them fill the gaps that they have. Well, the first thing you need to make sure of is that when they are calculating, they are fluently partitioning small numbers to help them with their larger calculations. So if they were adding 8, add 7, they would split the 7 into a 2 and 5 and see that as a 15. And they would do that in the context of a calculation like 88 add 7. They'd see that you get to 90 by using 2 of the 7, and then your other 5 make 95. Now, if you have got children who are still counting on or back one at a time, in these situations where they should be partitioning a number and doing the calculation in 2 steps, then you need to intervene now. It's so important. As children move on to harder calculations, they need to be able to do those subordinated steps fluently. And if they can't, then their mind is going to be too busy for them to cope with paying attention to the bigger picture of what's going on. So as you start children working on calculations, you need to check and identify if there are any of these children who are counting on or back one at a time. And if there are, then you need to use these worksheets, the fast addition and the fast subtraction worksheets, which specifically hone in on the skill of breaking down a small number into 2 parts in an easy context. And the children who are struggling most will need to work with counting beads so that they can visually represent what they're doing and see the colour change in the middle and check their answers. So if they're making mistakes, they can unravel their own mistakes and sort themselves out. And then you'll need to make sure that once they've done those worksheets, they start to apply that partitioning of small numbers in other calculations. And you may want to check that by giving them column additions or column subtractions, and there's plenty of worksheets on these topics. They're all free to download on my website, which is authenticmaths.co.uk/worksheets. And all of these worksheets have click-through buttons so that you can go to a site where you can download a version that will auto-generate lots more versions of the same worksheet. And you can get those worksheets with answers if that's helpful to you. Of course, all this is free. So the next thing you want to do is identify where children have gaps in their tables, where there are multiplication tables that they're just really not fluent with. So say you identified that one child had missed doing their 6 times table and they just needed to become more fluent with that. You could set them worksheets on column multiplication by 6, because each of those multiplication results by 6 is going to get practiced so many times. Now what you don't want to do is give them a multiplication table to help them, but you do want to give them some structural apparatus, and that might be the counting beads laid out in their 6 times table, so they could quickly count 6, 12, 18, 24 and see all those results with the partitioning embedded in them. Or it may be an array pack. This is an array pack for the multiplication table by 6, so they can see each result. This is 6 times 6, so it's 6 rows of 6 squares, and they can count them up if necessary, but they can also clearly see how each result relates to the other results to find shortcuts. And once they've done plenty of multiplication by 6, I would move them on to short division by 6, because you're practicing your division results, which are so closely related to the multiplication results. It makes great sense to do all this together. Now you may identify then that some of your children are struggling to understand what they're doing with multiplication or short division, in which case I suggest that you go back to multiplication or division by 2 and get them doing it with Dienes blocks so that they deeply understand both the multiplication and division. And here's a link to a video that explains how to teach multiplication with Dienes blocks or place value counters you may prefer to use. And here's a link to a video that explains how to teach short division with the same apparatus. Now during these 10-minute fluency sessions, you may also want to set children concept check sheets, which are available with most schemes of work, where question 1 is always on one particular maths concept, question 2 is always on the next one, and so on. A great fun way to do this is to use the Propeller Rapid Recall boards. This is the one for the Year 4 curriculum, and what you have to do is, as a teacher, you choose a number between 350 and 450. All the children write it in here and copy it into all the same shapes, and then complete the questions for that number. And you can get them working in groups at first so they can help each other out, and it'll become very obvious if the whole class has missed something in particular, because everyone will be struggling. And where one child has a gap in their knowledge, their group will often be able to help them fix that very quickly. And you may want to go back and use the Year 3 boards, and for children who are flying, you may want to push them on and use the Year 5 boards. But of course, if children are flying with their maths and are struggling in other areas of the curriculum, you can set them targeted intervention work that suits them in other subjects while the rest of the class are doing their maths. So hopefully that gives you a feel for how you can intervene to fix the gaps in students' learning really quickly and effectively. But it leaves the question of how you start to teach the Year 5 curriculum from day 1 effectively, given that a lot of children do have gaps in their learning. So I'm recommending this year planner, which is also available from my worksheets download page, which is authenticmaths.co.uk/worksheets. And in this, you have term per page planning. There's an overview of half a term in each column. And where there are complicated words used, you'll find that there are links to videos and worksheets to help you deeply understand what you're doing. There are also codes here which link directly to the curriculum extract for Year 5, so you can see how every topic on the curriculum is covered in these page per term plans. Now this plan should help you teach maths more efficiently and effectively than any pre-written scheme of work which gives you detailed lesson by lesson plans, because they support you to understand how to know when you can move on quickly and when you need to slow down in response to what's going on in front of you and how well your students are learning. But the other thing they do is they show you how to teach maths in a deeply structural way. So let's look at what that means. One topic that's on the Year 5 curriculum is long multiplication. So the structural way to teach long multiplication is with array. So an entry-level question on long multiplication might look like this. And the first thing it's doing is checking that children deeply understand that this multiplication means either 25 lots of 14 or 14 lots of 25. And it's just about counting up all the squares. And there's so much powerful learning goes on as you rehearse the essence of what multiplication is and help children believe that they are going to be able to do this if only they can count. And then you can set them free to try and find shortcuts. They may see 10 by 10 squares and section off hundreds. And gradually you can nudge them towards cutting off a strip that's 10 high, like this. And so they can see that this reduces to being 25 times 10 and 25 times 4. And if they can puzzle out these two results and add them together, they've got their answer. So we've rehearsed the distributive law of multiplication, that you can do it in 2 bits, the 25 times 10 added to the 25 times 4, and we can clearly see why that makes sense. We've rehearsed multiplication by 10, we've rehearsed short multiplication, and as you do all this, you can identify gaps. What exactly is it that the child in front of you is struggling with? And then you can set them worksheets in their targeted time and work with them to fix that gap. So some scheme writers are saying that because a lot of children are miles behind, you've got to take your whole class way back into the year 3 curriculum and teach it again. I think your children who are flying will be bored absolutely witless, and it's much more fun to start year 5 with a topic like this and teach it in a way that all children can access and deeply understand what it is they're trying to do. Even if they can't do all the component parts yet, we can fix that as the year goes on, and then we can come back to this topic later in the year, and hopefully everybody will be able to do it really well. And you can move on to the slightly harder long multiplication questions like this one. I'm not trying to rubbish some of the pre-written schemes. Some of them are absolutely excellent. And if yours is working well for you, then keep it and use it and enjoy it. The purpose of this channel is just to help you step outside of your scheme so you can make wise decisions about whether it is right for you and use it when it's good and improve it when it's not quite right for your class or could be better. So the big topics in year 5 are going to be moving on to big numbers, rehearsing the work on the 4 operations of column addition, column subtraction, short multiplication and short division with decimal numbers. Lots of work on proportion, on fractions and decimals. And then of course there's long multiplication, and there's a lovely range of topics on shape, space, measure and data. So if you've got access to a little bit of budget spend just now, what should you do with it? Well, here are my top recommendations. For your children who are struggling, they will still need counting beads, and some of them will need arrow cards, which help them identify which digit is the hundreds and the tens and the ones. So it's worth having some of those around. You will still need quite a bit of Dienes apparatus. I use it for establishing my teaching of large numbers. And here's a link to a video that explains that. I also use it to start to explore volumes of cuboids by building those cuboids with these blocks. I definitely recommend that you need plenty of place value counters, and these ones that I got from TTS are fantastic. Mainly because they have the reverse sides of the 0.1 and the 1/10th and the 100th and the 0.01, which you're going to need for your teaching of decimals and fractions in year 5. I recommend getting the Gareth Metcalfe IC Reasoning book for years 5 and 6, and that's just a low-cost download book, and that will give you lots of great teaching and extension activities to keep your bright sparks busy when they're flying. And of course there's NRich as well, which is totally free, which I recommend for the same purpose. As always, you'll need lots of squared paper, possibly for making array packs, but also for lots of other purposes. I do think you will need a bigger printing and photocopying budget this year, so you can print off targeted worksheets. You can justify this because you will need different resources to those you will usually need, and children will need different resources from each other because of the gaps in their learning. So fight for that printing and photocopying budget. And then, as I've said before, I recommend these Propeller Rapid Recall whiteboards. Children love them because they can correct their mistakes so easily, and they can work in groups or on their own. They are reversible, and there are different boards for different years of the curriculum. It may seem overwhelming at this stage of the year, but if you've survived the last 2 years, you can do this. And it should be a lot of fun as children start to find their feet and make great progress. I will be here live on this channel every Sunday at 9 o'clock right through until the Christmas break, taking your questions live. If you can't make those live sessions, feel free to post questions underneath this video, or to come to my Facebook group, which is Expert Primary Maths Teaching, and post questions there. I'd love to hear from you. The more challenging the situation you're in, the more I want to know so that I can try and puzzle out how to help you. If you thought this video was useful, please do tell your friends and colleagues about it or share it in groups that you're part of. And please do consider subscribing to my channel so that you can find these videos in the future. There are videos on how to teach every primary maths topic using really efficient and effective methods that are age appropriate. All the best for your teaching this year. Bye for now.